Hey, what's up everyone? Today I'm going to teach you how to tattoo script. I decided to do this on an actual client so I could show you exactly how I tattoo script on a live tattoo. So hopefully this makes it a little bit easier knowing exactly how to do it and what I use along the way. As always, if you like content like this and you're on your journey of becoming a professional tattoo artist, make sure you like and subscribe down below so you can keep up to date on all of the new content we come out with each week. And also, make sure you stick around to the end of this video because I'm going to answer the question I asked on the How to Draw Script video. I asked all of you guys what the best method of filling in your letters, numbers, whatever it is, what the best method to fill those in with, you know, being a shader, a mag, or your liner. I'm going to go over what I do and when I do it. So let's get into the live tattoo. So whenever you first start out with your stencil when it comes to script, you want to make sure that you are letting it dry for as long as possible. So I let mine dry for about 15 minutes. That means whenever I am tattooing, it's not going to have issues with your stencils rubbing everywhere, things like that, which could make it really, really hard to try to tattoo. So how I'm holding the skin right here, you want to make sure that you're stretching out this skin to be able to go in there with these really thin lines. What I'm using right here is a 7-round liner, and you can see that I'm propping my stretching hand up to have more stability when I'm tattooing, which is very, very important. So whenever I first go through this part, I'm only doing the outline. I'm not filling in as I go. I'm not doing things like that. So just focus on being as perfect with your line work as physically possible, because when this tattoo is done, you're going to be able to see any little inconsistency the whole time. And you can see that I'm floating my needle. What this does is really help me be able to see exactly where my needle is going into the skin. If you're running on the tube, you could have issues with having a hard time being able to see exactly where you are, and the ink also making your stencil really hard to see. So I definitely recommend, if you are wanting to get into script and things like that, practice focusing on floating your needle instead of running on the tube. One thing I did with this design that makes it look cool was using 2 different fonts. So I could have done this all one font, but it really wouldn't have stood out. So I did 2 different fonts and kind of had to live a little bit crooked on there just so it stands out and looks cool. Which eventually there's going to be more tattoos on this leg as well that'll fill everything in. Awesome, so we're just going to go through this tattoo, making sure all of our line work is absolutely perfect. Going steady, you don't want to go too quick with this because then you could accidentally mess up or you get a little bit shaky. All these lines have to be perfect. Alright, we're going to fast forward here a little bit till we get on to the next letters. Awesome, so now that we're done with the bottom part, we're going to get into this script. So a couple things you want to make sure that you're doing when it comes to script is there's going to be thin lines and thicker lines. In order for it to look really good and look correct on the skin, you want to make sure you're doing that. Some people like to use really thick liners and just one pass everything, but it just doesn't look as good as using a really thin liner is, and then just double lining up everything and then filling it in later. So definitely recommend doing it this way. It just looks a lot better when it comes to the tattooing process. So once again, I'm not worried about filling everything in. I'm going in with my second line right here, as you can see. I'm not making it super thick, I'm just following my stencil and making sure everything is exactly how I drew it out to be. Right there you can see that I'm hanging my needle out, which makes it very, very easy for me to tell where everything is and where everything's supposed to be. Awesome, so keeping with this method the whole way through, I'm going to speed up here a little bit until we could get to the other side. Okay, this is a really good angle to be able to see exactly what I'm doing. So what I'm doing right here is I'm pushing the needle. What that means is the needle is going in at an angle to where it's going forward the whole time. So I really like to tattoo this way. It puts the ink into the skin really nicely, and it makes it a lot easier for me to be able to see. See, if I was going the opposite way, the needles wouldn't be penetrating into the skin, the angle that I'm tattooing. And just like the other one, we're just going through, double lining the lines that need to, and making sure that we're only doing one line over the thin areas. This is why it's so important to make a perfect stencil when it comes to script and things like this, because if you cannot tell wherever everything needs to be, you're obviously going to mess it up. I'm using my points of contact. I have my elbow tucked in beside me so I could stay stable. Stretching the skin out exactly where I need to, and holding my machine to where my middle finger is underneath the cartridge, just to have all that extra stability helps out a ton whenever you're doing script, because the smallest inconsistency can really mess up your tattoo. Alright, so we're getting through with pretty much going over all of the outline with this tattoo. In the last video I made about how to draw script, I asked you guys a question of what you should use whenever you are filling in script and things like that. And it was honestly a trick question, because it just depends on the style of script you're doing, how thick it is, things like this. So with this one, I'm actually going to be using my liner and going in there. You have to be very, very careful with this. You don't want to overwork the skin, or it could cause complications with scabbing, things like that. So if you are first starting out, I definitely don't recommend that you go in there with a liner, because you could really overwork the skin. But obviously, when you go in there, you're doing it very lightly. You're just barely brushing into the skin. You're not trying to push it in there and, really get into the skin, because we're just right here. Right here is exactly how I do it. So I make sure that I'm going in there one time, and when I'm done, that area is done, and I just move on. You don't want to be there just really overworking an area, or it's going to scab up really bad and have an issue with maybe falling out completely. Especially with some of these thin lines, it could be very, very tricky to tattoo them perfectly without the lines falling out or things like that. So this is definitely something to practice at if you're wanting to get into this style. So we're just going to go through here, filling in these little areas. Now, when it comes to using mags, things like that, one thing you could really do is, whenever you're using your mags, sometimes I'll hold them to the side if it's a really tiny area that you're trying to get into. But the problem with that is it could really slice up the skin unless you know what you're doing. So that's another little trick that you can try on fake skins or something like that before you jump onto actual human skin, so you don't compromise the tattoo. And then obviously, if you're using a round shader, just do little circles filling in that area, and then just try your best not to stay in one area too long, or it'll obviously overwork the skin just like everything else. And for the bottom part, I decided to do a little bit differently. So I'm going to do some stipple shading down at the below. So I'm going to be using a method just like I would with traditional shading, so the whip method. So when I get down to the below, you'll see exactly what I mean. I just didn't want to blacken the area below. I kind of wanted everything to flow really nicely together, and the top part's really dainty, so I didn't want to just have this super dark, blacked in live on the bottom of it. So right here, what I'm going to do is start at the bottom and just whip shade up with that line, and what that's going to do is make stipple shading, and it'll end up looking really, really cool. Just like that. You just also want to make sure whenever you are doing this, you don't want to press too hard. If you're pressing too hard, it could cause issues with it going too deep in the skin, and it's not going to be crisp little circles. There's going to be like little blowouts and everything, which you want to stay away from. But this is how you do script. This is how I pretty much tattoo all the script. Besides, sometimes I'll use mags, sometimes I'll use round shaders, things like that. But I hope this was able to help you out, show you exactly how I do my script on every day-to-day tattoo. As always, make sure you're liking and subscribing down below so you can keep up to date on all the content we come out with each week. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you on the next video.